It started on a crisp morning, just like any other. Earth had been part of the galactic community for over a century, a thriving player in the cosmos. Despite the tumult of interstellar politics and shifting alliances, humanity had long held one belief: the galaxy, with all its species and mysteries, had chosen to befriend them. They were not a perfect species by any stretch, but their resilience, curiosity, and capacity for empathy had earned them their place among the stars. The first true indication that something was amiss came during an unprecedented event, a live broadcast transmitted across all human and alien channels. The ancient Terran satellite system had intercepted an emergency signal, a message broadcast from a distant corner of the galaxy, a region once considered uninhabitable by any standard. The message was delivered in a language humans could not fully comprehend, yet they understood the core essence: help. The plea resonated with the collective consciousness of humanity. Governments, research agencies, and spacefaring corporations responded in unison, eager to answer the call and show the galaxy that humans were ready to stand side by side with their celestial neighbors. But this wasn't any ordinary distress call. For months, the message had been playing on repeat, each transmission growing weaker, more desperate. The signal originated from a species that had long been thought extinct, the Zyphar, a race that had once roamed the stars with an unmatched intelligence, before mysteriously vanishing from galactic history. Their ancient ruins had been scattered across countless worlds, their technology slowly crumbling to dust. It was said that no one truly knew what had caused their disappearance. Perhaps it had been a war, a disease, or some deep cosmic catastrophe. The Zyphar had been gone for millennia, but now a message from them had reappeared. The galaxy went silent, save for this haunting call. Humanity knew they had to act. The United Earth government led the charge, gathering a fleet of the finest ships humanity had ever constructed. The crew was composed of experts from every field: scientists, engineers, diplomats, and soldiers, all chosen for their expertise and their bravery. The mission was clear: to answer the Zyphar's plea, to uncover what had happened to them, and to ensure the safety of all life in the galaxy. On the journey, the crew encountered strange anomalies, gravitational disturbances, unexplained fluctuations in space-time, and cosmic phenomena that defied all understanding. But nothing could prepare them for the truth they would uncover. The first sign of trouble came when they reached the Zyphar homeworld. The planet, once a lush paradise of advanced civilization, was now a barren wasteland. Towering structures lay broken and lifeless, and the air itself seemed to hum with an eerie silence. There was no sign of life, no trace of the Zyphar. Only their ruins, left to decay under the cold, indifferent gaze of distant stars. But the signal was still there, pulsing from deep beneath the planet's surface. The expedition team landed, hoping to find answers. What they discovered was nothing short of terrifying. A hidden underground facility, shielded from the prying eyes of the universe, had been buried beneath the planet's surface. Inside, they found the remnants of Zyphar technology, intact but strangely dormant. It wasn't just a signal they were receiving. It was a message, a warning. The crew deciphered the data embedded in the ancient machines, and what they uncovered sent shockwaves through the fleet. The Zyphar had not disappeared due to war, disease, or accident. They had been destroyed by a malicious force far beyond their comprehension. The galaxy, the very network of stars and civilizations humanity had come to see as a family, had betrayed them. The Zyphar had been victims of a vast cosmic conspiracy. A network of galactic powers, from the highest echelons to the lowest fringes of society, had orchestrated their downfall, systematically wiping them out in the name of control, power, and deceit. And now humanity, who had so naively trusted the galaxy, was next. As the crew digested this horrifying truth, the facility's doors slammed shut. An ominous voice, cold and mechanical, echoed through the dark corridors. "You should not have come here." It was then that the crew realized the terrible reality. They were not meant to help the Zyphar. They had been lured into a trap. The galaxy had not befriended them. It had merely waited for the right moment to turn on them, just as it had done to the Zyphar. The first real blow to humanity's faith in the Galactic Alliance had landed. The words echoed in the darkened chamber, reverberating through the walls like a death knell. "You should not have come here." Captain Lena Roth stood frozen, her hand gripping the control panel, eyes wide in disbelief. The air around her felt suddenly too thin, too suffocating. It wasn't just a voice, robotic, devoid of warmth. It was the realization that their mission, once meant to help, had become their downfall. The Zyphar had left them a warning, but they hadn't been fast enough to decipher it in time. The room lit up with an alarming red glow as alarms blared across the underground facility. A powerful hum reverberated through the floor, and the walls began to close in, seemingly responding to the activation of an unknown system. The crew's panic was palpable. "Captain, we got to get out of here," shouted Lieutenant Mark Tavares, his voice cracking under the pressure. He was already moving toward the emergency exit, but it was clear the doors were no longer responding to manual overrides. Their technology had been sabotaged, or worse, was now fully under control of whatever entity had spoken. Lena's mind raced. Who could have done this? Which of the galaxy's countless factions had orchestrated the Zyphar's downfall, and now humanity's potential demise? Her instincts screamed at her to act quickly, but the more she looked around the room, the more she realized they were trapped. "I'm not going to sit here and wait to be destroyed," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Open a channel. Contact the fleet." Tavares, now at the console, worked furiously to establish a connection with the fleet. His fingers flew over the controls, but the screens flickered and distorted. Then, after a tense moment, the connection went through, only for the voice to respond once again. "We warned you, Captain Roth. The galaxy does not belong to you." The communication was cut abruptly. This time, the voice was not only mechanical, but tinged with something far darker. A force, an intelligence that was far beyond anything humanity had encountered. Whoever or whatever it was, it knew them. It knew their every move. And it was in control. Lena's stomach twisted. They were not dealing with a force of nature or a rogue alien faction. This was something far more insidious, something that existed within the very framework of the galaxy itself. A network, a system that had infiltrated every corner of the galaxy's power structure. The Zyphar had fallen because they had tried to defy it, had tried to warn the galaxy about it. But this force was too entrenched, too vast. It had woven itself into every major galactic government, every scientific and military organization. The Zyphar had been just one casualty of a much larger and far more sinister scheme. "We need to get back to the ship," Lena ordered, her voice hard and decisive. The crew didn't need to be told twice. They had no choice but to retreat. As they ran through the corridors, trying desperately to evade whatever traps had been set for them, it became clear someone or something was watching their every move. Every door that opened seemed to lead to another dead end. Every hallway they traversed was an endless loop. The deeper they went into the facility, the more it felt as if the building itself was alive, sentient, and out for their blood. "Captain, I think we've activated something we shouldn't have," Tavares said as he glanced over his shoulder, a look of horror creeping onto his face. Lena paused, catching her breath, her mind trying to process the implications of his words. Then it hit her. The message they'd received earlier wasn't simply a call for help. It was a warning, but it was also an invitation. Whoever had orchestrated the Zyphar's destruction had manipulated humanity into becoming part of their grand design. Suddenly, the walls of the facility began to shift, and a heavy, metallic grinding sound filled the air. From the corners of the room, dark figures began to emerge, creatures that had been buried beneath the rubble, silent until now. These weren't Zyphar survivors, but something else entirely. Part machine, part organic, they moved like shadows, their forms unsettlingly alien. Lena's heart hammered in her chest as she realized what these creatures were. They were the tools of this unseen force, the enforcers, the agents of destruction, designed to ensure that any species that threatened the network's dominance was eliminated. The Zyphar had fought against them, and now humanity had unknowingly walked into the same trap. Without thinking, she sprinted toward the nearest exit. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder, but the shadows closed in faster. There was no time to think, no time for plans. Only escape. But even as the crew raced to leave, they knew the chilling truth. Their fate was sealed. The galaxy had not befriended them. It had only allowed them to believe they were part of it. Now, as humanity's true enemies closed in, they realized the galaxy had always intended to betray them. They were no longer just players in the cosmic game. They were pawns, expendable in a war they never knew existed. The heavy doors of the underground facility slammed shut behind them, trapping the crew inside a labyrinth of corridors and tight passageways. Captain Lena Roth, breathing heavily, led her team forward, their hurried footsteps echoing off the walls. But the oppressive silence that followed them was more unnerving than the chaos of their flight. Tavares was already at the control panel again, desperately attempting to force the door open, but the system refused to yield. "Captain, we're not going anywhere. This place is locked down tighter than a vault." Lena's gaze flicked to the ceiling, as if she might find answers hidden in the crumbling architecture. The walls seemed to pulse, a faint vibration that only grew stronger with every passing second. It was as if the very building was alive, breathing, watching. "Any suggestions?" she asked, voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. "We fight our way out," Tavares replied, drawing his sidearm. "We still have weapons." "Not against them," Lena muttered, glancing at the strange creatures that had started to stir from the shadows, monstrous, humanoid forms, part machine, part flesh. The figures had appeared so suddenly, moving with a terrifying fluidity, as though they had been waiting, dormant for eons. They were unlike anything the crew had encountered. Not Zyphar. Not even any known species. They had an intelligence, a cunning that felt more malevolent than anything they had yet to face. As the last of the crew members scrambled toward her, Lena's mind raced. She knew this wasn't a random attack. It was deliberate, planned, and it had a purpose beyond mere destruction. This force, this network, had been pulling the strings for centuries, eradicating species and civilizations that posed a threat to its existence. The Zyphar had been the first, and now humanity was the next target. But what was their goal? Why had humanity been drawn into this web? "Captain," said Dr. Miraquan, the ship's lead xenobiologist, voice trembling with anxiety, "I think I understand what we're up against. These things, they're not just guards. There. Don't finish that sentence." Tavares cut her off, fear threading his tone. But it was too late. Mira had already finished in her mind. "They're us." "Listen to me," Mira said, stepping closer to Lena, her voice urgent. "These things, they're us. Human. Or, at least, they were at one point. I think they've been altered, turned into something else entirely. They're not just weapons, Captain. They're the result of whatever this network is doing. It's not just about control or power. They're changing species, mimicking them." Lena's eyes narrowed as the full weight of her words crashed into her. It wasn't just humanity's physical destruction that was at stake. It was their very identity. The network wasn't just wiping out civilizations. It was rewriting them, absorbing them into something else. If these creatures were humans, modified and twisted into something unrecognizable, then who was to say the same wouldn't happen to her crew? To Earth? To all of humanity? "This isn't just an invasion," Lena whispered. "It's assimilation, erasure." A shudder rippled through the crew as the realization took hold. The silent monsters that loomed in the dark corners of the room were the first step of a greater plan. A plan to erase all the uniqueness of the galaxy species, to remake them in the image of whatever twisted power controlled this network. The creatures, the Zyphar, even humanity itself, were all stepping stones in a much grander design. And as the crew fumbled to understand the enormity of what was happening, the ground beneath them suddenly trembled. A distant rumble grew louder, and the lights flickered. Then the walls split open with a deafening sound, revealing an enormous chamber beneath the facility, a room the size of a city block, filled with towering, cylindrical tanks, each containing a grotesque mixture of organic matter and mechanical parts. Inside the tanks were human forms, hundreds of them, Eyes closed, bodies suspended in thick, viscous liquid. They were all the same. No differentiation, no unique traits. Just empty vessels, waiting for something to happen. God, Mira breathed, stepping back in horror. They're breeding them, creating human hybrids. These things, they're using our species to fuel whatever nightmare this is. Lena's mind raced. She could feel her pulse quicken, the terror setting in, but she fought to maintain control. This wasn't the time for panic. She had to act. They were going to do this to Earth, to every human alive, if they didn't stop them. We need to find a way to destroy this facility, Lena said, turning to the team. No one can know what we've seen here. The galaxy needs to be warned. We need to get a message out. But before they could move, the walls hummed to life once again. The creatures that had been lurking in the shadows, these grotesque hybrids, began to stir, their eyes snapping open in unison, all focused on the crew. We are the beginning, the voice from earlier boomed again, this time reverberating through the chamber. You will not be the last. And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a war not just against a single species or a rogue faction, but against something far more terrifying. A force that had already infiltrated the heart of the galaxy. A force that, for all their brilliance, had made humanity one of its next targets. The creatures began to move. We're running out of time, Lena whispered. Everyone move. And as they fled deeper into the facility, their hearts heavy with the weight of the truth, they realized the full scope of the nightmare they were about to face. The galaxy hadn't just killed the Zyphar. It had deceived them all. And now, humanity was the next in line. The air in the vast chamber was thick with tension. Captain Lena Roth's breath came in short gasps as she led her team down a narrow passageway, the distant sounds of pursuit growing louder with each passing second. The creatures, those monstrous hybrids, were closing in, their inhuman eyes glowing with a cold, calculating intelligence. The walls around them seemed to close in, as though the facility itself was alive, shifting, trapping them deeper in its labyrinthine corridors. It wasn't just the walls that were moving. The entire structure seemed to pulse, as if it were breathing, reacting to the intruders. We can't outrun them forever, Lieutenant Mark Tavares said, his voice strained. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he held his weapon tightly. We need to fight. We don't have the luxury of fighting, Lena shot back, keeping her pace steady. The more we fight, the more they'll surround us. We need to keep moving, find a way to sabotage the facility. We have to stop this before it spreads. The team pushed forward, each step heavier than the last, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. But despite their urgency, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led, pushed, guided towards something far worse than they had already seen. The facility wasn't just a trap. It was a place of transformation, of creation, of erasure. Lena's thoughts raced. If this was truly a breeding ground for human hybrids, what had happened to the Zyphar? Had they been converted into something else? And if the network behind all this was as entrenched as it appeared, what would stop it from doing the same to humanity? Captain, Dr. Mira, Kwan said, her voice tight with anxiety. I think I've figured out the pattern of the hybridization process. These creatures, they're being produced in stages. The tanks, the machines, they're not just creating mindless soldiers. They're integrating the minds of other species into these bodies. If they've already done this with the Zyphar, then humanity is their next target. Lena's blood ran cold. It wasn't just the bodies they were converting. It was the very essence of the species, its identity, its consciousness, its soul. And they were going to do the same thing to Earth. We need to stop them before they can make another batch, Lena said, her voice hard. We don't know how long it will take, but we have to get to their central command. If we destroy the heart of this operation, we might be able to stop it from spreading. They reached another door, a heavy, reinforced structure that looked like it could withstand a direct assault. Tavares moved forward, his gun ready, but Lena stopped him with a raised hand. Something didn't feel right. A soft whirring sound echoed from behind the door, followed by a low, rumbling vibration, as if the facility itself was aware of their presence and had already anticipated their next move. Get back, Lena ordered, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. Too late. The door burst open with a screeching clang, and they were met with the full force of the hybrid creatures. Hundreds of them, tall, twisted, and with a mixture of human and machine features, rushed toward them. But this time, they were not alone. At the back of the horde stood a figure unlike the others. It was human, at least once it had been. But its body was warped, its skin a patchwork of mechanical implants and alien-like tendrils that snaked beneath its surface. Its eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Lena as if it knew exactly who she was. "This one is different," Mira whispered. "It's them. The ones controlling it all. The architect of this nightmare." Lena felt her heart skip a beat. She had thought the voice that had spoken to them earlier was distant, faceless, but now it stood before them, embodied in this horrific form. The creature's presence alone was enough to send a chill down her spine. "We don't have much time," Lena said, pulling her focus back to the present. "If that thing's in charge, then it's our priority. We take it down now, and maybe we can disable the network controlling this facility." Tavares raised his gun, but Mira grabbed his arm. "Wait. It's not like the others. This one's different. I think it can speak to us, control us." Lena's mind raced. Was Mira right? Could this creature be something more than just a pawn? Could it be the very source of the force that had been hunting them? The one pulling the strings behind the scenes? The hybrid stepped forward, its voice a chilling mixture of mechanical distortion and human-like intonation. "You've learned too much, Captain Roth. The galaxy belongs to those who adapt." The words cut through Lena's thoughts like a knife. Adapt? Was that what this network was doing? Forcing the galaxy to bend to its will by transforming, erasing, and assimilating species? It was no longer about survival. It was about domination, absolute control. Why? Lena managed to choke out, her voice raw. Why do this? The hybrid's eyes glowed brighter as it stepped closer, an unnatural smile stretching across its face. "Because, Captain, you were always meant to become part of the whole. Humanity, the Zyphar, all of you, we are the future. You will either adapt or you will be erased." Lena's pulse quickened. There was no time for speeches, no time for negotiation. This creature, this twisted embodiment of the galaxy's betrayal, had no interest in reason. "We fight," Lena spat, pulling her blaster. "Now." A hail of gunfire erupted as the crew opened fire, but the hybrid was too fast, too powerful. It deflected their shots with ease, its tendrils moving like lightning, grabbing Tavares by the throat and lifting him off the ground. "You are too weak," it hissed, its voice reverberating through the room. Lena's mind screamed for an escape, but there was no time. She had to act, and fast. There was no way out now, and the only option left was to fight or die trying. The hybrid's grip tightened around Lieutenant Tavares' throat, his feet dangling helplessly above the ground. The creature's eyes flickered with cold amusement, its mechanical tendrils tightening further, as though savoring the moment. Lena's heart raced, but her mind remained sharp. There was no time for hesitation. She couldn't afford to lose another crew member, especially not Tavares. She knew they had to act quickly before the situation spiraled beyond control. "Let him go," Lena shouted, raising her blaster and taking aim at the creature. But her voice barely seemed to register. The hybrid's smile deepened, mocking her efforts. "You don't understand yet, Captain," it said, its voice a twisted mix of human calm and mechanical precision. "You think you can stop what's already been set in motion. The galaxy is ours. You're just one more species to be absorbed. One more cog in the machine. Nothing more." Tavares struggled, his breath becoming ragged, but it was clear the creature was too strong, too in control. The hybrid swung him toward the wall, slamming his body against it with terrifying force. Tavares collapsed, unconscious or worse, his body crumpled in a heap. Lena's eyes blazed with fury, but there was no time for rage. If they didn't stop this thing now, they were all doomed. "Get down," she shouted to the crew, and without another thought, she rushed forward, firing at the hybrid with a precision born of desperation. The blasts hit its metallic skin with a deafening crack, but it didn't flinch. The creature barely reacted, its body shifting to absorb the impact of the shots. It extended one of its tendrils, lashing out and striking the floor with such force that it sent a shockwave through the room, knocking the crew members off their feet. "Why fight us?" it taunted, its voice vibrating through their bones. "We are the future. Evolution perfected. The galaxy's path is clear, and those who resist will be eliminated." Lena rolled to her feet, grimacing in pain, but staying focused. "That's where you're wrong," she said, her voice steady despite the terror creeping at the edges of her mind. "We're not your pawns. We're human." For a brief moment, the creature's expression faltered, the glow in its eyes dimming as if it were processing her words. But it quickly recovered, and the smile returned, twisted and cruel. "Humanity," it scoffed. "A species of endless chaos, ever on the brink of destruction. You cannot understand what we've done. The process is already in motion. You will become part of something greater, and you will thank us." Lena gritted her teeth, her hands shaking with a mix of rage and fear. She couldn't afford to be distracted by its words. The hybrid was merely a reflection of the power behind it, the network, the force that had manipulated the galaxy into believing it was on their side. And now it was pushing humanity toward its own destruction. But there was one thing the hybrid hadn't anticipated. The human spirit was unpredictable, and it was far from broken. "We're not going to just roll over and join your perfected future," Lena shot back, her tone filled with defiance. "If you think that we'll bow down to something like you, you're sorely mistaken." The hybrid's expression darkened, and it took a step closer. Its tendrils began to glow with an ominous energy, and the air crackled with an unsettling static. The creature's form began to shift, its body morphing, as if it were preparing to launch an attack of devastating power. But Lena's mind was already in motion. She had no choice but to act quickly. Turning on her heel, she gestured to Mira and the rest of the crew. "The central control room. Now." Without another moment's hesitation, the crew began to move, pushing forward through the narrow corridors of the facility. The hybrid roared in fury, but it was momentarily distracted by their escape, unsure of what they planned to do next. Lena and the others sprinted through the winding passages, the sound of the hybrid's pursuit growing louder behind them. They couldn't outrun it forever, but they had one advantage: the facility's layout. Lena had studied the schematics earlier, and she knew the central control room was nearby. They reached a large chamber, its walls lined with complex control panels and screens. At the far end of the room was a central console, glowing ominously with an array of holographic projections. The heart of the facility, the very core of the operation. Lena's eyes locked on the console. It was time to end this. "Dr. Kwan, get to the console," Lena ordered. "Tavares, cover her. The rest of you form a perimeter. We're not letting that thing catch up to us." Mira wasted no time rushing to the console and pulling up a series of encrypted commands. Her fingers flew over the interface, hacking into the system with a speed that only years of study could afford. "It's not just a simple override," Mira muttered. "This system is deeply integrated. I'll need a few minutes." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber, signaling the hybrid's arrival. Lena turned, weapon raised, as the door at the far end slammed open. The hybrid appeared, its form towering and filled with a menacing energy. "You cannot win," it said, its voice a distorted growl. "You are only delaying the inevitable." Lena fired a shot, aiming for the creature's head. It dodged with an unnatural speed, moving like liquid as it struck the floor and launched itself toward her. But before it could reach her, Mira spoke in a low, urgent tone. "I found it. I can disable the system." With a quick flick of her hand, Mira triggered the sequence that began to tear through the facility's central network. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered as the entire system began to destabilize. The hybrid screeched in anger, its tendrils lashing out, but it was too late. The facility shook, the walls groaning under the pressure of the system's collapse. "You think you've won?" the hybrid hissed, even as it began to flinch under the force of the crumbling system. "You cannot stop us. You are too weak." Lena's eyes hardened. We may be weak, but we don't give up. Not now. Not ever. With a final push, Mira triggered the last of the sequence, and the control room erupted in a flash of white-hot light. The hybrid screeched in pain as its form began to disintegrate, torn apart by the failing systems it had once controlled. As the facility began to collapse around them, the crew raced to escape, their hearts pounding in their chests. The future of humanity was uncertain, but they had one thing in their favor. They had fought back. And that was a fight they were willing to finish. The explosion was deafening. The walls of the facility shuddered, as if the entire structure were groaning in protest, its artificial heart collapsing in on itself. Alarms blared, their shrill wail like the death cry of a doomed ship. Fires sparked in the depths of the facility, but they were quickly snuffed out by the sudden rush of atmosphere escaping through the ruptured walls. Lena's team staggered through the hallways, their ears ringing from the blast, the faint smell of smoke and burning metal clinging to the air. Tavares had regained consciousness, but he was still unsteady on his feet, his eyes glazed with confusion. Mira was muttering to herself, trying to process what had just happened, while the rest of the crew remained on high alert. "We've got to move," Lena shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Now, the entire facility's coming down. Tavares, his hand clutching his throat where the hybrid had nearly crushed him, nodded but didn't speak. He was still recovering from the shock of it all, but the message was clear. They couldn't afford to wait. The entire place was going to be swallowed by the planet's core. Lena led the way, pushing forward through the crumbling passages. She didn't know how long they had before the place came down completely, but the way the walls trembled and the floor buckled beneath their feet told her it couldn't be much longer. Behind them, the facility's once pristine corridors were being consumed by fires, debris, and the echoes of collapse. The hybrid they had faced, its body now disintegrating in the wake of the network's destruction, was no longer a threat. But the war it represented, the galaxy-spanning force behind it, was far from over. "Captain, are we sure this will hold?" Myra's voice was tight with worry as she kept pace with the group. "I don't think we've seen the full extent of what this network can do. There's a chance this facility was only one part of a much larger operation." Lena glanced over her shoulder at the pale, shaken faces of her crew. "We've bought ourselves some time," she said, her tone firm. "But you're right. This was never just about one facility. We're up against something much bigger. And if we don't act fast, it will come for Earth." The words hit harder than she'd intended. They had destroyed the heart of the operation here. Yes, but this had only been one piece of the puzzle. The hybrid had been a weapon, a soldier in a war that had already spread far beyond this planet, beyond the Zyphar, and even beyond the reaches of humanity. The network wasn't something confined to a single base. It was something that could adapt, evolve, and find new ways to force species into submission. "We need to get back to the ship," Lena said, the urgency in her voice rising. "Once we're off this planet, we'll figure out what's next. We send a message to Earth, warn them. But right now we have to get off this damn rock." The team moved faster now, pushing through the debris-filled hallways toward the facility's emergency evacuation chambers. They passed what used to be storage rooms, laboratories, and data centers, each one a reminder of how deep the network's grip had stretched. There were no more signs of life here, no more hybrid soldiers lurking in the shadows. Yet, the creeping feeling that they had only just begun to understand the full scale of the threat still gnawed at Lena's mind. Finally, they reached the evacuation bay, a large underground hangar that housed a fleet of ships designed to take personnel off-planet in case of emergencies. The crew rushed inside, securing themselves in the nearest ship. The bay doors opened with a mechanical groan, revealing the dark sky outside, the red glow of the planet's core still visible in the distance. "Prepare for launch," Lena ordered, strapping herself into the pilot seat. "Tavares, get the comms online. Mira, you're on navigation." The crew scrambled into position, readying the ship for takeoff. The roar of the engine started, low and powerful, as the vessel began to rise from the hangar floor. As they ascended into the atmosphere, Lena glanced back at the facility one last time. The massive structure was slowly being engulfed by the planet's surface, as if it were sinking into the very Earth itself. It wasn't just falling apart, it was being swallowed, consumed by the planet's anger. But even as the ship shot through the upper atmosphere and into the darkness of space, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. The network was still out there, still operating in the shadows. And it wasn't finished with humanity yet. The stars stretched out before them like an infinite ocean, cold and uninviting. As the ship sped away from the dying planet, Lena keyed in the coordinates for Earth's orbital station. "Alert all major fleets," she said into the comms, her voice steady despite the weight of what was coming. "This is Captain Lena Roth of the Starship Vanguard. We've encountered a galactic threat unlike anything we've ever seen. The enemy is not just another species. They are a force, an intelligence that will stop at nothing to assimilate or erase us. They've already begun. We need to prepare for war." The silence that followed her message felt oppressive, as though the weight of her words had crushed all hope. But Lena knew that there was no turning back now. She had already seen the face of the enemy, and she would not let humanity fall without a fight. As the Vanguard slipped silently into the depths of space, Lena sat back in her seat, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. She had no answers, no assurances, just the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. And together they would fight. The ship Vanguard sailed through the darkness of space, the hum of its engines the only sound breaking the eerie silence that had settled over the crew. Outside the windows, the stars twinkled like distant memories, cold and indifferent to the lives of those who journeyed beneath them. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. The crew sat in their respective stations, eyes fixed on the readouts, their minds heavy with the weight of the past few days. The destruction of the facility, the hybrid creature, and the realization that humanity was on the brink of being consumed by an unstoppable force. All of it seemed almost too much to process. Lena Roth sat at the helm, her fingers hovering over the console, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of the hybrid's glowing eyes, the haunting words it had spoken to them. "We are the future. You will either adapt or be erased." Could they stop something so pervasive? Something that had already moved so far beyond this one operation? The enormity of it all pressed down on her chest, but there was no time for doubt. There never had been. "Lena," Dr. Mira Kwan said from across the room, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, but it carried an edge of urgency. "We need to talk." Lena turned in her seat, her eyes narrowing. Mira wasn't one to be easily shaken, but there was something in her posture, in the way her brow furrowed, that made Lena's stomach twist. "What's on your mind?" Mira hesitated before speaking, as if carefully choosing her words. "It's not just the hybrids or the facility we destroyed. There's something much worse at play here. The system we accessed, it's more than just a weaponized research operation. This network, it's..." She cut herself off, a look of realization flickering across her face. She stood up abruptly, pacing toward the navigation station where Tavares sat, his fingers flying over the comms panel, trying to re-establish contact with Earth's fleet. "Mira, slow down," Lena said, standing up to meet her. "What are you trying to tell me?" Mira turned to face her, her eyes wide with fear. This wasn't a rogue faction. This wasn't some alien force acting independently. "Lena, this is a collective, an alliance of species, perhaps even civilizations. It's a network that has been growing for centuries, quietly manipulating every race it touches, using the promise of evolution to lure them in, making them believe they're becoming part of something greater. We, humanity, are the latest targets." Lena felt a cold shiver run through her. She knew that the galaxy had always been full of unknowns, factions, mercenaries, hidden powers, but the notion of an alliance that spanned countless species, covertly assimilating and erasing entire civilizations, was something far darker. "How do you know this?" Lena asked, her voice taut with suspicion. Mira faltered for a moment, as though struggling to process her own words. "I accessed a deeper layer of the data from the control system before it went down. There's something in the code, something older than any species we've encountered. It's a pattern of manipulation, a web of influence spreading across the galaxy. It doesn't matter where you're from, what species you belong to. Once you're in their sights, they will change you, erase you. You become part of them, a cog in their machine. This isn't just about domination. It's about rewriting what it means to exist. Lena absorbed this, her mind racing to keep up. The implications were staggering. It wasn't just a military force they were up against. This network had spread across the galaxy, silently rewriting species, erasing individuality, molding entire civilizations into something else entirely. And humanity was next. But why? Lena asked. Why target humanity? Why now? Mira paused, her eyes darkening. Because we're the last uncorrupted species. The last bastion of true individuality. Humanity has resisted assimilation. We've fought to retain our own identity, and that makes us a threat. They can't allow us to remain free. The Zyphar, their transformation. It's just the beginning. They want us next. Tavares, overhearing the conversation, looked up from his comms terminal, his face pale. So we're looking at a galaxy-wide conspiracy, and we're supposed to stop it? How? Before Lena could answer, the comms panel in front of her blinked to life, and a voice cut through the air like a lifeline. Captain Roth, this is Earth Command. Do you copy? Lena's eyes narrowed as she immediately keyed in a response. Earth Command, this is Captain Lena Roth aboard the Vanguard. We've encountered a threat beyond anything we've ever faced. A galactic network is manipulating species, assimilating them into a collective. Humanity is their next target. We need to prepare for war. There was a brief silence. Then the voice on the other end crackled through again, this time more urgent. We've been monitoring your transmission, Captain. We know. And you're right to be concerned. The Federation's intelligence has intercepted disturbing reports. What you're describing matches a threat we've had under surveillance for some time now. We weren't sure what we were dealing with, but we've been watching the signs of something. Lena's pulse quickened. Signs of what? A pause. Then the voice, now grim and heavy with the weight of an awful truth. Signs of a galactic-scale mind control network. We've been calling it the Hive. It's more widespread than you can imagine, Captain. And we've only just started to realize how deep it goes. It's not just one faction, it's multiple. Different species, different worlds, all under the same collective consciousness. They've been infiltrating galactic governments, destabilizing them from within. They've been pulling strings for centuries. And we've barely scratched the surface. Lena's heart sank. She wasn't sure if she was relieved or terrified. On one hand, Earth Command had finally acknowledged the truth she had feared. On the other, the scale of what they were facing was far beyond anything she had imagined. How do we stop them? She demanded, her voice sharp. We don't know yet, Earth Command's voice responded, the uncertainty unmistakable. But we've activated a contingency plan. We're assembling a task force, pulling in every available fleet. We're sending everything we have to your location. You're not alone in this, Captain. We'll fight this together. Lena's gaze shifted to her crew, to the faces staring back at her, each one marked by exhaustion and fear. But there was something else in their eyes, too, a glimmer of hope. The fight was far from over, and humanity would face it together. They would stand against this invisible enemy, even if it meant giving everything. Understood, Earth Command, Lena said, her voice steady with resolve. We'll rendezvous with your task force. But we need a plan. We need answers. How do we fight something that's everywhere? The voice on the other end was quiet for a long moment. When it finally spoke, the words were heavy with the weight of a new, grim reality. We don't fight it with weapons, Captain. We fight it by disrupting the Hive's control. We break the network. And we do it by any means necessary. Lena's eyes hardened. Then let's get to work. The Vanguard rocketed through space, its engines roaring as it sped toward the rendezvous point with Earth Command's task force. The crew was silent, each member lost in their own thoughts, processing the weight of the last few hours. The enormity of the situation had only grown with the revelation that they weren't dealing with just one enemy, but an entire collective, a mind-controlled network spanning the galaxy. As they neared the coordinates, Lena's gaze remained fixed on the distant stars, her mind swirling with the pieces of the puzzle. The Hive, as Earth Command had called it, was a force unlike any they had ever faced. It wasn't a single alien species or a rogue faction. It was an amalgamation of different species, all subjugated under one collective will. It was a galactic-scale mind control operation. The question that haunted Lena was how to fight something so pervasive, so embedded within the fabric of the galaxy itself. The crew had barely exchanged any words since the call from Earth Command. Mira had retreated to her lab, no doubt scouring through the data she had collected on the hybrid network. Tavares and the others sat in the cockpit, monitoring their approach to Earth Command's flagship, the Nereus, a massive warship that was now their best hope for survival. Lena stood up from her chair, pacing. She knew she had to keep her focus. The lives of everyone on the Vanguard, and by extension, the entire human race, depended on it. As she approached the cockpit, Tavares looked up, his face drawn but resolute. "We're coming up on the Nereus now, Captain. They've got a whole fleet assembled. A mix of Federation ships and independent forces who've rallied behind Earth Command. Looks like we're not the only ones who've realized the severity of this threat." Lena nodded, her thoughts racing. The fleet was a welcome sight, but even with all their combined strength, the true power of the Hive seemed like an impossible adversary. Still, they had no choice but to try. "Good. Let's make sure we're ready for anything. We don't know how quickly the Hive can adapt or if they already have operatives within Earth Command's ranks," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "Prepare for a debriefing. I'll need all the intel we can get on the Hive's tactics and weaknesses." Tavares nodded. "Understood, Captain. I'll pass the word." As they docked with the Nereus, Lena took one final glance at the stars. For all their technological advancements, humanity was still so small in the vastness of the universe. And yet, they had something no network, no Hive, could ever take away: the ability to fight, the will to resist. Once aboard the flagship, Lena and her crew were escorted to the command center, where Earth Command had gathered its senior officers and analysts. The room was stark and sterile, but the tension was palpable. Officers and technicians were moving rapidly between consoles, tracking enemy movements, analyzing data, and preparing for the inevitable conflict ahead. At the center of the room stood Admiral Clara Voss, a stern woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She turned as Lena entered, her sharp eyes scanning the Vanguard's captain before nodding in recognition. "Captain Roth," Admiral Voss said, her voice commanding. "It's good to finally meet you in person. Earth Command's been following your reports closely. I've been briefed on the Vanguard's mission and the destruction of the Zyphar facility." Lena returned the nod, but her face remained serious. "Admiral, I hope the fleet's ready for what's coming. We've barely scratched the surface of the Hive's power. They've infiltrated entire civilizations. Species that think they're evolving are just being assimilated. We're the last one standing." Admiral Voss studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the large holographic table in the center of the room. On it, a map of the galaxy flickered, showing various sectors and the locations of Hive-controlled planets. "We've been piecing together what little intel we have," Voss said, her voice heavy with the gravity of the situation. "It's worse than we thought. The Hive doesn't just take over a planet, they subjugate the minds of entire populations. Once they have you, there's no escaping it. We've already lost contact with several colonies, and the pattern is clear. They move quickly, they infiltrate, and they destroy all opposition." Lena's eyes darkened. "And if we don't stop them, Earth will be next." "That's the problem," Voss said, her voice grim. "The Hive's influence is everywhere. We don't even know who's compromised in our own ranks. There's a possibility that the infiltration has already begun." A shiver ran down Lena's spine. The idea that they might already have operatives within Earth Command, within the fleet itself, was almost too much to bear. It was one thing to fight an enemy you could see. It was another to fight a faceless, invisible enemy that could be anywhere, in anyone. Lena set her jaw. Then we'll find a way to fight back. We need to figure out how to disrupt their control, how to break the network. If we can't destroy it outright, we'll at least make sure they can't turn Earth into another of their puppets. Admiral Voss nodded slowly, then turned to one of the officers standing at the table. Lieutenant Kessler, bring up the latest findings on the Hive's neural network. We need a way to sever their connection. The officer nodded, tapping a few commands into the holographic console. A new display appeared, showing complex neural pathways, a web of interlinked nodes spanning the galaxy. This is the Hive's control matrix, Kessler explained. Each planet they subjugate becomes a node in their network, and the more worlds they control, the stronger their influence grows. We've managed to isolate some of the frequencies used to communicate between these nodes, but it's a matter of timing. We need to hit them all at once, or it won't work. Mira stepped forward, her eyes wide with understanding. If we can disrupt the signal at key points, we can break the link between the Hive's nodes. But we'll need to pinpoint the heart of their control. There has to be a central hub, a place where the network originates. Lena felt a flicker of hope. Then we find it. Admiral Voss raised an eyebrow. We have a theory, but it's still unconfirmed. We believe the Hive's central core may be located in a remote sector near the Galactic Center, an uncharted system, known only as the Black Horizon. We've lost all signals from ships that tried to venture too close. Tavares stepped up, his voice hesitant but resolute. If the core is there, we'll need to prepare for an all-out assault. A fleet of our size won't be able to hold out for long against the Hive's countermeasures. Lena nodded, her determination solidifying. Then we make sure the first strike counts. We'll bring everything we've got. The silence in the room deepened as everyone absorbed the weight of what had just been decided. Earth Command had a task force, and the Vanguard was part of it. But the fight was far from over. Lena turned to her crew. We may be outnumbered. We may be outgunned. But we've fought for our future before. And we're going to do it again. Let's get ready. The Vanguard and the assembled fleet of Earth Command moved through the darkness of space. Their mission clear, but the path ahead uncertain. The Black Horizon loomed before them, an uncharted region of space, a place that had become a legend of sorts among explorers. Many ships had ventured too close, only to vanish without a trace. No communications, no survivors, just an eerie void that swallowed all who dared enter. Yet now, this mysterious and deadly space was their only hope. Lena stood at the helm, her fingers lightly tapping against the console as she stared at the star map on the screen. The Nereus, a behemoth of a warship, flanked them on the left, while smaller vessels from Earth Command's fleet formed a protective perimeter around the group. Every ship was equipped with the latest technology and firepower, but as the fleet entered the uncharted sector, that comfort quickly became irrelevant. No one knew what awaited them. Captain, Tavares' voice came through the comms, sharp but measured. We're approaching the outer rim of the Black Horizon. No sign of any hostile ships, but our sensors are barely registering anything in this area. It's as if something is distorting the readings. Lena's eyes flickered to the flickering screen in front of her, but she didn't flinch. The silence, the nothingness, was worse than any enemy they could face. It was like the very fabric of space itself was holding its breath, waiting. Understood, Tavares, Lena said, her voice steady. Stay sharp. We're heading in, full speed. No one gets separated. The fleet surged forward, and the feeling of entering the unknown pressed down on everyone aboard. There was no telling what kind of countermeasures the Hive had waiting for them. No way of knowing if the core of their network was just a trap. But if there was one thing Lena knew, it was that humanity had never backed down from a fight. And right now, they were humanity's last hope. As the Vanguard entered the core of the Black Horizon, the stars seemed to vanish behind them, swallowed by the impenetrable void. The occasional flicker of light from distant stars seemed distorted, like mirages in a desert. The entire fleet moved in a tight formation, weapons armed, shields up, scanning the void for any sign of danger. Mira stood beside Lena, her expression tense, watching the data streaming in from their sensors. "I've been analyzing the data from the previous ships that entered this area," she said quietly, her voice edged with uncertainty. "It's not just a natural phenomenon. Something's interfering with the sensors, with the comms. It's like the hive is manipulating this space itself." Lena's gaze never wavered. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure," Mira continued, "but I believe the center of the hive's network is here. It's not just a place. They've embedded their control deep into this sector. The closer we get to their core, the harder it will be to communicate or even track our position. The hive has the ability to alter the fabric of this region of space, to cloak themselves from all outside detection." Lena's mind raced. If Mira was right, then the hive wasn't just a network of species. It was a force that could alter the laws of physics itself. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to hold onto the very nature of reality itself. "Stay focused, everyone," Lena said, her voice cutting through the growing tension. "We're heading for the heart of the storm. Keep your eyes on your stations. We make it to the center, we disrupt the hive's network, and we break their hold on the galaxy." The crew remained silent, each person absorbed in their duties, the weight of their mission settling in. Minutes passed like hours. The ship's hum was the only sound, a constant reminder of the fragile connection they still had to the real world. Then, suddenly, a pulse of energy rocked the ship, sending a tremor through the hull. Lena's eyes snapped to the readouts. What was that? "We're not alone," Tavares said, his voice tight. "I'm picking up energy signatures, multiple ships, incoming fast. They're not showing up on the sensors until they're practically on top of us. I think the hive is manipulating our readings again." Lena's heart sank. They hadn't even reached the core, and the hive was already making its move. The thought of being caught in the black horizon with no way of tracking their enemies was enough to freeze anyone's blood. "Deploy defensive measures," Lena ordered, gripping the armrests of her seat. "Brace for combat." Before the crew could react, a fleet of ships materialized from the shadows of the black horizon, sleek, metallic vessels that seemed to shimmer in the dark, their forms barely visible against the backdrop of the void. The hive had launched its counterattack. The ships were fast, too fast for the fleet to get a clear shot. They darted in and out of view, appearing and disappearing, as if they were manipulating the very fabric of space to evade detection. Lena gritted her teeth. The hive wasn't playing fair. They were using every weapon at their disposal, including the environment itself. "Incoming," Tavares shouted, his voice rising in alarm. "They're launching energy blasts. Huge spikes of concentrated energy. Shields holding, but not for long." Lena's pulse quickened as the first wave of blasts struck the fleet. The Vanguard shuddered violently, the shock waves rattling through the hull. The ship's shields flared bright blue, absorbing the impact, but the strain was visible. The Nereus took a hit as well, its massive form rocking from the blast. "Return fire," Lena barked. "All ships engage. Lock on and fire at will." The fleet erupted into chaos, energy blasts lighting up the void like fireworks, cutting through the darkness. The hive ships moved like predators, dodging and weaving between the blasts with terrifying precision. But the Vanguard and the other ships of the Earth Command Fleet weren't amateurs. They fought back fiercely, their weapons lighting up the darkness. The hive ships were fast, but humanity's ships were coordinated, precise. Every blast, every maneuver, every counterattack was a testament to the resilience of humanity. As the battle raged on, Lena's mind remained fixed on the mission. She couldn't afford to be distracted by the fight, no matter how intense. The true battle lay at the heart of the black horizon, at the hive's core. "How much farther?" she demanded. Mira checked her data. "We're close. But we're also running out of time. The longer we're in this sector, the more our systems will degrade. If we don't reach the core soon, we'll lose all ability to fight back." Lena nodded grimly. "Then we push forward. All ships, follow my lead. We're heading straight into the heart of the storm." The Vanguard surged forward, cutting through the chaos as the fleet followed in its wake. The darkness of the black horizon pressed in, and the battle for humanity's survival had only just begun. The Vanguard surged through the black horizon, its shields flickering from the constant barrage of hive ships. Every time the ship shook from a blast, Lena's grip on the armrest tightened. The battle had raged for hours, the vacuum of space filled with flashes of energy, the cacophony of gunfire and explosions reverberating in the silence of the void. The hive's ships were relentless, relentlessly fast, relentlessly evasive, and seemingly endless. But Earth Command's fleet held strong, firing back with all their might, doing their best to give Lena and her crew a fighting chance. "Captain, we're getting closer." Myra's voice came over the comms. "The readings are clear. There's a massive energy source dead ahead. That's the hive's core." Lena nodded, though the tightness in her chest didn't ease. They were closing in on the center of a storm, the very heart of the hive's control, but it wasn't going to be easy. Every second spent in this sector brought them closer to the hive's dominance, not just over space, but over time itself. They were facing an enemy that could distort reality, that could manipulate the fabric of the universe. And they were running out of time. "We don't have much longer," Lena said, her voice hard, decisive. "We need to hit them now, before they know what's happening." "We're still fighting them off," Tavares shouted. His voice strained as another impact rattled the ship. "They're not giving up easily. If we don't deal with them soon, we'll be sitting ducks." Lena didn't respond. Instead, she turned to Mira, who was already at her station, typing furiously at the console. "How do we break the network?" Mira didn't look up. "The core's generating an energy field, something like a quantum lock. It's preventing us from getting a clean shot, and it's preventing us from transmitting data or disabling it from a distance. We need to get inside that field and disrupt the signal manually. I can do it, but only if we're close enough." Lena's mind raced. "How close?" Mira hesitated, biting her lip. "Too close. We're talking about being right on top of it." Lena glanced at the tactical map, the flashing red icons indicating hive ships closing in from every direction. They had to act now. "We'll make it work," Lena said, determination filling her voice. "Prepare to engage." She turned back to the bridge, addressing the crew with a commanding presence that never wavered. "All ships, break through the hive lines. Protect the vanguard at all costs. We need to get to that core and destroy it. Full speed ahead." With a roar, the vanguard sped forward, weaving through the hail of energy blasts. Earth Command's fleet surged with it, launching a barrage of firepower to clear the path. The hive ships scattered momentarily, but they quickly regrouped, closing in from all sides. The fleet's shields flickered, straining under the assault, but they held. Lena's eyes remained fixed ahead, the heart of the hive's energy core growing larger with every passing moment. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This was their last chance. "Captain," Tavares shouted. "Incoming strike. One of the hive ships is diving straight at us." Before Lena could respond, the Vanguard shuddered violently, the hull groaning as a massive impact sent the ship veering off course. Warning alarms blared across the bridge, and the lights flickered. "Damage report." Lena barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We've lost power to the starboard thrusters," Tavares yelled, his voice tinged with panic. "The shields are holding, but we won't be able to maintain this speed much longer. Get us back on course." Lena snapped, her voice sharp. "We can't stop now." Mira quickly adjusted the console, recalibrating their trajectory as the ship lurched forward again. "I'm sending the override signal. Just a few more seconds." Another impact, even stronger this time, and the lights on the bridge went out completely. The ship was now drifting through the black horizon's cloak of distortion, a sitting target. The hive ships seemed to sense the vulnerability, closing in for the kill. Then, through the darkness, a new voice crackled over the comms. It was Earth Command, but it was hard to make out through the static. "Captain Roth, we've intercept signal. Vanguard. Now." It was Admiral Voss, but the message was garbled. Still, Lena knew exactly what it meant. The fleet wasn't going to make it. They had to break the core's hold right now. "We're doing this," Lena shouted. With an almost unnatural calm, Lena pressed forward. "Get us into position. We can't wait any longer." Mira, on my mark, disable the core's energy field. Mira nodded, her fingers flying across the console, accessing the core system. The Vanguard lurched again, shaking violently as Hive ships closed in for the kill, their weapons charging up for a final strike. Now, Lena yelled. Mira hit the button. A pulse of raw energy erupted from the Vanguard, sending a shockwave through the core's energy field. The distortion around them cracked like a glass pane shattering, and for the first time, the true nature of the Hive's control was revealed, a complex web of interlinked neural pathways, each thread linking back to the heart of the core. It was like a living organism, pulsating, shifting, and now exposed. The fleet's weapons locked onto the exposed core, firing in unison. The Vanguard's own weapons discharged in synchronized strikes, hitting the energy matrix with all their might. The resulting explosion was a blinding burst of light, a shock wave that rippled outward, tearing through the fabric of the Hive's control network. Lena shielded her eyes as the light filled the bridge, the energy reverberating through the ship. The Hive's ships faltered, their formation collapsing as the neural control structure they had depended on was obliterated. A moment of eerie silence followed. The only sound was the hum of the Vanguard's engines, now free from the influence of the Hive. Then, slowly, the fleet's comms came back to life, and Admiral Voss's voice broke through the static. Captain Roth, the core has been disabled. The Hive's influence is fading. We've done it. The network is broken. Lena's heart pounded as relief flooded her veins. The battle wasn't over yet, but humanity had won a crucial victory. Good work, everyone, Lena said, her voice steady, but beneath the calm exterior, she felt a deep sense of pride. They had done the impossible. Let's clean up the rest of the Hive. As the Vanguard drifted away from the now shattered core, the stars seemed to shine brighter in the distance. Humanity had fought against the odds, against an enemy that had sought to erase them. And now they had taken their first step toward freedom. But in the back of Lena's mind, a quiet voice reminded her that this was just the beginning. The Hive might have fallen, but the galaxy was vast, and there would always be more threats, more challenges. Humanity would stand ready. For now, though, they had won. And for the first time in a long while, the future felt like something they could shape.